guys, thanks so much for joining us once again on Study Crypto. We really appreciate your support. Today, we're going to talk about whether or not Bitcoin can actually make it to $1 million. I know the market's been a little rough recently and things have been looking very bearish, but let's want to explore this topic because I know a lot of people thinking it and a lot of people heard things about it. But we're going to dive into it today with some data. And so it's going to be a pretty interesting ride. But before we get into it, please do me a favor. Please hit the like button as well as the subscribe button if you're getting value from these videos. We really do appreciate it, as well as ding that notification bell. It helps us with the YouTube algorithm getting these videos out to people in a timely fashion. So let's get into it. Actually, before we get into it, I have to relay the usual message. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And as always, with crypto investing, it is high risk. So please be very, very careful in what you do. So let's get into it. All right. So first of all, I want to send a shout out to Invest Answers, who a lot of this data I was able to get from them. You can check out their YouTube channel as well. I'll have their channel and info tagged at the end of this video. They have some really great info. So kudos to them for putting together a lot of this info. So let's get started. So let's ask the question that we're asking for this video is, can Bitcoin hit $1 million per Bitcoin anytime soon? That's a good question. I mean, considering that almost 10 years ago it was worth about $1, if that. So that would be an extraordinary run. But we're going to take a look at the possibilities of that and the likelihood of that with some hard facts and what some experts are saying and the way the smart money is banking on the future of Bitcoin. Okay. So first up, let's talk about this. This is kind of big news. I would say it's very big news. Christine Sandler, who is the head of the digital assets division at Fidelity Investments. It's the third largest manager of finances in the world, with assets under management of $4.2 trillion. She came out recently, the head of their digital assets department, and she said publicly, and I quote, "We're a Bitcoin first company." That's huge. For a major financial institution, the third largest asset manager in the world, to come out and make a statement like that, that's a real big deal, guys. That's so huge. Okay. Other things to note, they've been mining since 2014. They've been doing Bitcoin mining since 2014. They've been in the game, baby. They've also been placing high net worth investors in Bitcoin since 2017. In addition to that, they also own 8% of Marathon Mining, which is one of the largest Bitcoin mining outfits in the world. Marathon Mining alone has 8,000 Bitcoin in their treasury. Okay, so this is a really big deal. It's a big statement from an extremely big company. Just for perspective, again, they hold over $4.2 trillion in assets under management. Bank of America only has $1.5 trillion of assets under management. Wells Fargo has $600 billion, not even trillion, assets under management. And TD Bank, America's most convenient bank, they only have $335 billion of assets under management. Okay, in comparison to Fidelity, who's coming out with this massive statement. Fidelity could buy all three of those banks and have money left over. Okay, that's how large they are. This is their position. Moving on. Next, let's take a look at. So, with this statement, they had some projections. So, they are seeing, based upon their models and their internal analysis, Bitcoin hitting $100,000 by year's end, which is pretty much in line with what a lot of people were expecting last year, but they see that this year in 2022. Now, what their models also suggest is if Bitcoin follows the cell phone trajectory of adoption, the adoption rate that we actually all as people got onto the cell phone networks, if Bitcoin continues that route, then it'll hit $1 million by 2028, which I thought is pretty amazing. And that's actually their most likely scenario. Now, if it misses that target, they'll see it follow the adoption of the internet, which means Bitcoin and the network will grow and the value of Bitcoin will grow. And each Bitcoin will be worth $1 million, not by 2028, but by 2034. So I thought that was pretty fascinating as well. Again, Fidelity very bullish. These are big numbers, something to consider moving forward when you strategize your portfolio, considering this is what the big money and the smart money is doing. Now, we're going to take a look at another chart here. This is a Greg Foss's modified model. Greg Foss is a bond analysis guy, very smart, very well respected in the community of finance. This is his model regarding Bitcoin. Now, if you see here, this is actually a little bit modified because this is modified to adjust for a 14 million Bitcoin cap. There's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be made, but out of that, there's an estimated 5 or 6 million that are lost forever because people lost keys to their wallet or they sent them to the wrong address and they're dead in a wallet somewhere. So in reality, there's only about 14 million Bitcoin that'll ever exist. So this is going off of that assumption of 14 million Bitcoin that will ever exist, which is pretty much in line with what most of the high level analysts think. So with that said, global assets, the global asset value of all assets is $900 trillion. Okay, 900 trillion if you value all global assets. Now, if you look at the gold allocation, gold currently has a 1.22% allocation of all global assets, which gives it $11 trillion worth of value. Now, if Bitcoin were to get a 1% allocation of all the global assets, that would put it at $9 trillion in terms of a market cap. Okay. So we have a $9 million market cap at a 1% allocation of all global assets. Okay. Now, if it got a 1% allocation of all global assets, giving it a $9 trillion market cap, that would put the price of Bitcoin at $642,000, 642,857. If it got the allocation of 1% of the global assets, basically the same as gold, which many people see as being very possible. Next, if Bitcoin actually doubled that allocation to 2%, okay, getting 2% of the global assets, okay, which would basically be double gold, okay, that would be a $22 trillion market cap. And that will put one Bitcoin at 1.57 million, okay, if it just got 2%, okay, which would basically be double gold, okay. Now, and the last piece of this, we have if Bitcoin were to replace the bond market. Now, one thing to note about the bond market, bonds are trading at negative yields right about now, and they have for a while. And with the way inflation is, they will continue to do so. What does a negative yield mean? That means it's not positive. What does that mean? That means you're losing money. You're not actually getting money. You're losing. You're getting a negative yield, a negative return on your bonds right about now. You're not getting a positive yield. You're not getting positive capital cash flow return on your investment. You're getting a negative return on your investment with bonds. Okay, that's how bonds are operating in this high inflation economy we have right now. Now, with that said, bonds still hold 5% of all global assets. 5% are tied up into bonds. That's $45 trillion that are getting a negative yield, that are not making money, that's actually losing money as an investment. $45 trillion out of $900 trillion in the world is losing money. Bonds, crazy. Now, if Bitcoin were to replace the bond market and get that 5% allocation of the global assets, which is 900 trillion, that would put the value of one Bitcoin at $3.2 million. Okay? $3.2 million for one Bitcoin if it replaces the bond market, which again, the bonds hold 5% of all global assets. But the problem is they're not actually getting a yield. You're not actually making money on bonds. You're getting a negative yield. You're losing money. People are losing money. $45 trillion in the market is losing money right now because they're getting negative yield from negative yielding bonds because of inflation. So that's how that looks. Now to the right, what we're seeing is a conservative calculation. So let's assume that the likelihood that Bitcoin gets a 1% allocation of the global assets like gold, let's say that's at 60%, and because that's very likely. And let's say it's only 30% likely that it gets a 2% allocation of being double gold, right? And then let's say there's only a 10% chance or a 10% likelihood or 10% of Bitcoin could replace bonds, right? Let's say it's only 10% of replacement of that market. Well, if Bitcoin was able to do that, 60% of of doing the current gold market, only 30% of doing double gold, and only a 10% allocation of the current bond market, that would give you an expected Bitcoin price of 1.178 million. Because again, because those calculations basically come 60% of the Bitcoin allocation at 1% would be a $385,000 Bitcoin. 30% allocation of double gold would be 471,000, and the 10% allocation of the bond replacement would only be 321,000. And so you add all those up and you get an expected Bitcoin price of 1.178 million. Pretty cool. Okay, moving on. Now, again, we kind of went over this, but again, just to keep in mind, the amount of assets in the world is $900 trillion worth of assets. And again, if Bitcoin gets a 5% allocation of that, one Bitcoin will be worth 2.142 million. That is not adjusting for the lost Bitcoin. That's still considering a 21 million Bitcoin cap. Just something to keep in mind. Now, again, consider that, the amount of negative yielding bonds, again, in the world today is around 20 to 30 trillion US dollars. So that's a big market that is available that Bitcoin can replace and getting people positive yields again. Okay, that bond market, 5%, that could easily make Bitcoin explode into several million for one Bitcoin. Now, quickly, we're going to go into something called Metcalfes Law. I'm not going to dive deep into this video. It's beyond the scope. It's basically a law that can give you the projections of the value of a network based upon the expansion of the network and the growth of the network. Simply put, it says that the value of communications networks is proportional to the square of the number of its users. Bitcoin is a network. And so as that network grows, the value grows. And so if you use Metcalfes Law strictly, Metcalfes Law puts the value of one Bitcoin at $11 million and change by 2030. Honestly, that's very unlikely because there's a lot of factors that doesn't take into account. But it's worth considering because Metcalfes Law has been used to project the value of many other networks in the past. Again, Bitcoin is a network. It's a monetary network, a communications, energy, financial network. So So wrapping all this up. So again, if you want to get all the specifics, I'm going to have a link to the actual video that kind of does a deep dive into the math. All this is scientific math with models that really smarter people than me put together. I just like to look at them and take what I can from them to make my investment decisions, not investment advice. So if you look at the Metcalfes Law valuation for Bitcoin by 2030, it's at 11 million. If you modify that method, the modified Metcalfe method, it puts Bitcoin at 3.4 million by 2030. Stock to flow model, there's a lot of stock to flows model out there. Plan B has the most widely accepted one. Stock to flow basically is about how long would it take to replace the existing stock of of Bitcoin or a particular asset. If it had to be replaced from scratch right now, how many years it would take? Like a global real estate market, if you had to try to rebuy it all, it's like 100 years or something like that. Point is, stock to flow is a very sound model for pretty much every asset class, from real estate to gold to silver. Now, if you use the strict stock to flow model, it's going to put one Bitcoin at $9.5 million by 2030. Then we have the Fidelity estimate of having it at $1 million by 2030. Greg Foss, again, bond expert, really amazingly well-respected financial models, puts it at $2.142 million by 2030. And if we look at the bond EV model we just looked at that took into account the bonds and if Bitcoin can replace that, that's again putting one Bitcoin at $1.178 million per Bitcoin. And Robert Breedlove, who is a really big person in the crypto space, very vocal in politics, and he has a lot of very powerful models. He's putting it at 7.3 million. He's actually thinking Bitcoin's going to hit like 13 million in then like 10 years or something like that. But his models put it at 7.3. And then finally, we have Kathy Woods with ARK Investment, one of the most respected funds when it comes to technology and forward-thinking technology and disruptive technology. Her estimates, her models put one Bitcoin being worth $1.1 million. So if you add all these up and you get the average price of all the models, one Bitcoin by 2030 should be worth $4.6 million. Okay, $4.6 million by 2030. Pretty awesome. Now consider this. I'm about to wrap this up. Consider this. In order for Bitcoin to hit that $1 million price for one Bitcoin by 2030, it would need to have a compound annual growth rate, CAGR, compound annual growth rate of 50%. That means every year it at least increases by 50%. It compounds every year by 50%, the compound annual growth rate. So in order for Bitcoin to achieve $1 million by 2030, it would need a compound annual growth rate of 50%. In order for Bitcoin to hit the price of $4 million by 2030, it would need a compound annual growth rate of 83%. So every year, that means it would have to increase by 83%, compounding on top of each other every year. Okay? So compound annual growth rate of 50% in order for it to be worth $1 million by 2030, or a compound annual growth rate of 83% in order for it to be worth $4 million by 2030. Well, I guess the real question is this. What is Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate currently and historically? What is it? Any guess? 10%? 20%? 40%? What is Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate that it's experienced up until this point? Because when you know the past, you can get a good idea of what the future is, right? The compound annual growth rate of the last few years should give you the idea of what the compound annual growth rate is going to be moving forward. And again, we need at least a 50% compound annual growth rate to hit that $1 million, right? For one Bitcoin. Well, guess what the compound annual growth rate historically of Bitcoin is? It's 196%. It has a compound annual growth rate historical average of 196%. That's a 5.2 million percent return in 10 years. That's Bitcoin's performance. It's the best performing asset in all history. So, with this said, I don't want to throw hopium out there. The idea that it continues a 196% compound annual growth rate moving forward is unlikely, but possible, but unlikely, but possible. Okay. It's likely going to slow down a bit, but that's just to give you an idea of what it's done. And that gives you an idea of what it's likely to at least do moving forward. Okay, guys, so that's pretty much it. So yeah, so did we answer the question? Can Bitcoin hit 1 million? Yeah, it could probably hit 5 million in 10 years. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. That's quite possible. It's not outside of reason to think that one Bitcoin could be worth $5 million in 10 years when you strictly just look at the math. Okay, guys? And when you look at the math, the adoption, and everything else. All right. So that's it, guys. Thanks so much. Wrapping this video up. Please, if you enjoyed this content, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please share this video. And we really appreciate it. And I'll catch you next time. And leave some comments down below. I want to see what you guys think. Am I crazy? Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm nuts? Do you think there's some validity here? What do you think? What do you plan to do? Let us know. We love to hear from you. Talk to you soon. Take care. Hey guys, thanks so much again for viewing our wonderful video, and please don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button if you found value in this, and please ding the notification bell as well. Thanks so much. See you next time.